Hello, everybody. Hi. I'm Kate Wardin. I am an engineering manager at Target Corporate in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I had a nice commute here a couple of days ago. And I'm also a founder of Developer First Technical Leadership. So this is not going to be your typical tech workshop at a conference. And so a couple of logistical things before we get started here. I'll be presenting some of the talk formally, and then in between, most of it will actually be an interactive discussion. And so for this, I will need you to find a partner that you will be doing these interactive activities with. So I will give you a chance to do that right now. And if you want to opt out at any time, you can leave. I will not be offended. But go ahead and find a partner. Raise your hand if you don't have one. All right, find someone to connect with here. It can be a group of 3, too. You two, look right behind. Oh, you got someone to your side, too. And it's going to help if at least one of you have a device with internet access, because we'll be using some things online. And then also it will help if both of you have a pen or paper or something to type with to take notes. All right, does anyone still not have a partner? When? Can we find him a partner here? Okay, got one? Is everyone good? All right. The first interactive activity that you will be doing with your partner will be to do introductions. So you might already know each other, but I just want you to start by introducing yourself to one another. Tell them your name, tell them your company, tell them your role at that company, and then an answer to one of these questions. And since it will get a little loud in here, I would appreciate it if when you hear me start talking that you quiet down so we can move on with the workshop. So go ahead with the introductions now. All right, did everyone have a chance to introduce each other? Looks like a couple are keep talking. All right, moving on. So I'll go through an agenda for the next 3 hours. So first we'll be going through why are we here? Why are we talking about this subject of developer first technical leadership? We're going to go through what is developer first leadership. We're going to go through manager versus leader activity, time management and prioritization, how to empower your team as a tech lead, social styles. Then we're going to have a break. Then we're going to talk through giving feedback, career conversations, one-on-ones, and being an authentic leader. Okay, so I mentioned it'd be helpful to have a device with internet connectivity. So the materials that I'll be walking through today are on the developer-first.com website. So I'll give everyone a chance to navigate here. There is a password. So if you go to developer-first.com, and then hover over resources, click workshop materials, and then the password is Devox, all lowercase. There's also a survey link there. That's for after. Although you can take it now if you want. Okay. So you can keep navigating to that if you still aren't there. Yes? The password? Oh, Developer-first.com. Is it not working for anyone else? Oh. Is it working for anybody? Yeah? Not if you're on Wi-Fi. Okay. It's okay. I have screenshots of all the activities, so you can download it after the session if you want to go through the materials. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you. Okay, so we can just jump right in. So this will also be in that workshop document, these questions. But the first thing I want you to do with your partner is to talk about the number one challenge that you're facing in your role on your team. Whether you're an engineering manager, a tech lead, a junior level developer, just talk about why you're here attending this conference or this specific workshop. So talk about why you're here, what's the number one challenge you're facing, and then what are you hoping to get out of the session? Go ahead. Okay, hopefully you've all had an opportunity to share the reason why you're here at this session. So now I can do the same. So I made you do it, so now I will tell you why I'm here. I'm here for 3 reasons, which I'll walk through now. The first one is my mom, so she's the reason I'm here. She gave birth to me, so I'm planet Earth today. But we were talking about when I became a boss a couple years ago and how surprised she was that I had taken this career path because she didn't feel like it fit my personality. And so she wanted to tell me some stories about some really horrible bosses that she had had in the past, and how she was surprised that I had gone, into this career path. And so I was thinking, man, it's the 1980s. She's an independent woman. She's the first to graduate college. This is already a really hard time to be a woman in technology. And so your boss should really be the last person from convincing you to leave the workforce. And so I started thinking about the impact of bad bosses and whether I was really up for this challenge and this type of role on an engineering team. Because as the saying goes, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. It's true with my mom. It's true, I'm sure, for some of you who have had some horrible bosses in the past. Just how many, though? So I started to do some research. I found a 2017 Gallup engagement study that said that 50% of respondents have left a job to get away from their manager at some point in their career. And this was actually a study on 27 million employees on 2.5 million different teams in 195 different countries. So this is a pretty universal issue. And the second reason is that I recognize that engineers can and should be picky when choosing where to work these days. So looking at our industry specifically, according to the National Center for Educational Statistics data, and this is actually based on United States data, but I have to believe it's very similar across the world, there's going to be about 70,000 people graduating with computer science degrees or from technical boot camps, et cetera, coming into the workforce. But then according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Employment's projections data, there's going to be about 700,000 open roles for computer science degrees. So by 2020, this means that there's going to be 10 times the amount of open roles versus qualified candidates for these roles. So as organizations, we're really going to have competition, and we have to make sure that we're able to stand out as preferred places to work. And not only stand out for people to apply to and want to work at, but also really keep people happy and make sure our retention rates are awesome. especially knowing that retention rates are at an all-time low across the world. So they say that 1 in 4 workers will quit their jobs for whatever reason this year. And by next year, that'll be 1 in 3 people. They say that in software engineering especially, the time that someone's in a role is getting shorter and shorter. So the average of time is about 2 to 2.5 years right now for software engineers to stay in their roles. And so as organizations, I know that we cannot afford to ignore this. $11 billion is lost annually due to turnover. And they said that 75% of the reason people leave are actually preventable by, in my opinion, awesome leaders. And so the third reason is that I've witnessed several managers, honestly including myself, struggle with that psychological and emotional shift from going from being an individual contributor to suddenly leading a group of people. So for me, I left on a Friday. I actually got married and went on my honeymoon, and then I came back that next Monday alongside the people that I was previously working with and that I was friends with. And I was all of a sudden their boss. And I didn't have any tools or training or resources or a 90-day plan to really feel confident in my role as a leader. And so I saw a gap as I was researching this additionally, and I found a Career Builder study that showed that only 40% of new engineering managers do receive formal training when they start in that role for the first time. And so those are the 3 reasons why I'm here and why this topic is especially important to me. So those 3 reasons are 50% of people are leaving due to bad managers. Engineers, we know, have many, many options when choosing where to work. And we do have that lack of training for new leaders. So I wanted to come up with some resources for this, and that's why I'm here today to share some of those with you. Okay, so the next activity that you'll do, and actually we can just shout these out because it's kind of fun to hear what other people say. I want you to tell me about the worst leader that you've ever had. So just shout out some adjectives to describe those leaders. Micromanaging. Single-minded. Seagull man. Oh yeah, that's great. I haven't heard that one. What was that?
He thinks he's the best one ever, and his opinions are the only one.
Oh, big ego. Yes, thank you. Sexist manager. Man. Absent. Yeah. No vision. I didn't hear that one. Say it again. No empathy. Yeah. No insight.
Bottom line manager. I also had this experience. They are so focused on their goal that even in your one-to-ones, everything turns out for, so what are you going to do to accomplish their goals? And they forget about what you're looking in your career.
Oh, okay. So just what are you working on? What are you completing? And not where do you want to go with your career?
They put a target.
Yeah.
And they ask you to cooperate with this. And then in your one-to-ones, they're not even asking, like, okay, which direction you want to go with it.
Oh, okay.
They are asking, how far are you with implementing this new or whatever.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, so I always enjoy that activity with audiences of all different sizes. So I like to then talk about, why do bosses get a bad rap? Why did my mom have this reaction when I told her I wanted to be a boss? Okay, so let's unpack this. I think a lot of things naturally stem from the media that we're exposed to, but we don't have formal training. So we really just emulate the leaders that we see, kind of like parenting. So those degrading leaders, they're the task givers, they're intimidating, they're the Bill Lumbergs of the world, or they're just like relentlessly cruel and cold. And so like I said, I think we do emulate what we see if we don't have formal training. And there's also these admirable tech companies taking strong stances by seeing what happens when they do completely flatten their orgs and just remove managers all in all. And I think that sometimes we also promote our best engineers into management roles who probably shouldn't be people leaders. I think that we can apply technical skills to a lot of different jobs and industries, but it's really hard to just apply those same technical skills to people leadership day one. And so we could just give up. But I really love Google, and I love Google because they test these things out and then they report back to us. So they wrote an article about what they learned from flattening one of their organizations and removing all the managers. And what they found was that without managers, people were left searching for basic answers to questions and needs, as well as guidance on important areas such as career advice. So that's great for myself and for others who have chosen this career path. We're here to stay at most organizations. So now I want you to tell me about the best leader that you've had. So similar, just kind of shout out some adjectives.
Problems disappear.
Makes problems disappear. Magician. Talks to you. Listens to you. Even better, listens. Trustworthy. What was that? Know what developers do. Facilitator. Empowers. Servant leader. Love that. Humble.
Talk to you multiple times a year, so that'll be at the end.
Yeah, it doesn't wait till annual reviews to check in with you. I love that. Okay. All right, thank you so much for participating. So, like I said, with doing this activity a couple of different times, I've realized that we do have to think differently about leadership so we can avoid being that bad leader and be that awesome leader that all of us can talk to. Okay, so that same study that Google did also studied characteristics of great leaders. And so here are the findings that they found. So a great leader empowers their team. They create inclusive environments. They are productive and results-oriented. They're great communicators. They support career development and discuss performance. They have a clear vision and strategy, and they have key technical skills. So it's funny because you kind of highlighted all of these. Okay, and so we're definitely going to walk through all of these topics today. Yes?
I was going to ask, what do you mean by key technical skills?
Key technical skills, I think to his point, like understands what the developers are doing, can ask the right questions, can speak on behalf of the team. Yeah, and we'll definitely dive into this as well, because that's actually a topic of debate that I think is really interesting, like how technical should an engineering manager be? Should they still code, etc.? Yeah. Okay, so I promised you 40 slides ago that I would talk about what developer first is. What is this developer first leadership? It's actually a concept that is really, really clear to me now after being in this role a couple years. And it's very simple, but it is going to require a mindset shift compared to our traditional forms of leadership. And for me, honestly, that's that I work for my team and not the other way around. So really kind of like that servant leadership that you spoke about. Here's my brag slide. So I've tried out a couple of these techniques on my teams over the past couple years. And so compared to the United States national average stats for engagement and retention, I've been able to pull my team ahead of those and really have really great stats for both of those categories. Okay, so the next interactive activity will be manager versus leader. And so I'm going to give you a couple minutes with your partner just to think about, when you think of the word manager, what does that mean? What type of tasks is a manager taking on versus a leader? And so if you don't have the site materials, this is what it looks like. If you have a pen and paper, that's great. And if not, you just want to talk through those, go ahead and talk through those. And so the main point here that I am trying to make is that as managers and as leaders, we have a lot of different hats we have to wear throughout the day. And so what do those tasks look like? So go ahead and talk through those two different categories. And then I'll also share the ones that I came up with too. So I'll give you 2 minutes to do that. All right, it sounds like you're coming up with a lot of really great examples, so I can share the ones that I came up with now. Okay, so like I said, as an engineering manager, as a tech lead, or whatever role you're in, there's a lot of different hats you have to play throughout the day. And some of them, to me, really define what a leader is and go above and beyond that role of just the title of an engineering manager. So for me, a leader is building strong teams, providing feedback, motivating and inspiring, establishing and sharing that team vision, appealing to people's emotions. So that really strong emotional intelligence is really required to practice. And that's why when a lot of engineers become managers, it's important for them to get those skill sets. Creating culture, unleashing potential. And then when I think about those manager duties that we just have to do in our roles, that means to me aligning people to work in order to achieve our goals, guiding and evaluating on progress of those goals, monitoring budget, minimizing risks, planning and prioritizing, and then acting as the interface between the team and the outside world. Okay, so thank you so much for playing along with that. Hopefully you're able to take away something from what does it mean to really be a manager versus what does it mean to also be a leader. Okay, so, once you become a manager, you need to welcome interruptions into your calendar. So I think this is the face a lot of people get once they have more and more and more meetings. You don't have to make your calendar anymore. You have a manager calendar. And so a lot of these interruptions are often, quite frankly, just part of your job. And so it can be really, really powerful to audit yourself and look at the buckets of where you're spending your time. And if they're not where you want to be spending your time, make a plan to adjust those. So I actually do this periodically about every quarter, sometimes even more frequent, just to make sure that I'm spending my time on the right things. Okay, so the next activity, here's a screenshot of it here, and this one you can do alone, is just if you want to look at your calendars right away on your phone, but look at how you're spending your time now. And then imagine if you only had 10 hours in a week, how would you want to be spending your time? So make a little pie graph of the proportions of where you spend your time now, and then on the side of it, make one for how you would want to be spending your time. Go ahead and do that now. And what I like to ask people is if you show, someone you love or someone you care about, whether it's your team or your boss or your partner or your family, show them how you're spending your time and are you proud of that? So think about that as you're looking at your calendar and reflecting on how you are spending your time. Does that align to your role description and what you're expected of in your organization? And then once you're done with that, I have a couple questions that you can work with your partner on answering, just as a reflection to take away and maybe hopefully something to commit to as you leave today and go back to your teams. So take a couple minutes to answer these questions with your partner as well. All right, hopefully that gave you enough time to kind of chat through these and think about a way to improve or change the way you're spending time based on how you ideally would break out those different activities. Okay, so now a couple tips that I have learned that have worked well for me. The first one is to stop multitasking on the important things. Studies show that our brain actually can't handle more than 2 activities at the same time. You're just rapidly switching between both of those. So even though we think we're multitasking, we are truly single-threaded. Okay, and multitasking actually causes a 10% drop in IQ and leads to as much of a 40% drop in productivity. And so think about those important tasks that you're working on that you are multitasking on, and think about if you want to have a lower IQ as you're working through those. Now, obviously, there are some things that you should and can multitask on. But make sure that you're not multitasking on the important things, like having a one-on-one with a team member on the phone and reading emails, or maybe writing performance reviews and watching The Office. So it's really, really important that we're not multitasking on those important things in your jobs. Okay, a couple other time management and prioritization tips. Email. I like to look for things to prioritize when I'm scanning through my emails in the morning. So things that indicate urgency, or maybe possibilities to quickly unblock a team member, and definitely messages that are only addressed to me because I know that someone else isn't going to take care of it. But definitely just try to kill those long email chains when possible and just suggest a quick call. Calendar. Calendars exist to organize and communicate. So what I like to do is scan my calendar on Fridays and the first thing in the morning and think about, are there meetings that I can skip, cancel, or send a proxy? And I also like to ensure that there aren't several meetings in a day that drain my energy. And I also like to make sure that I'm blocking time for unplanned work, travel time, and lunch. All right, meetings. My first tip is if you do despise meetings, consider if you're in the right role as an engineering manager. But for meetings that we have, make sure that you are creating and sharing an agenda or requesting an agenda from the person who set up the meeting. Make sure it's editable if possible so that other people can contribute topics that they thought this meeting was about that they want to discuss. Include as much context and required prep in the meeting invite. Make sure you're identifying the purpose, both in the invite and then verbally once everyone arrives, so that they make sure that you're all on the same page before starting to talk. Meetings can be huge, huge time or money wasters when these aren't further set at the start of the meeting. Make sure that meetings aren't just sharing updates. Technology can be used for this. You can use Slack, email, whatever that is to just share updates one way. And then also make sure that you're capturing action items out of the meeting. So start with a verb and then who owns that task. Also, I like to say, make sure you're being a great facilitator. So if you see someone always talking and someone really overpowering the meeting and talking over people, make sure that you say, hey, this person wasn't done getting their point across. Can you wait? All right, so if you have a pile of to-dos, I like to use this Eisenhower matrix to organize my to-dos, whether it's daily or in the year or in your lifetime. It's a really, really great way to organize all the tasks that you want to complete into categories that are important versus not important, and then urgent and not urgent. And I think it's kind of funny because I have a lot of to-dos that I'm like, honestly, I'm probably never going to get to this, so why is it even distracting me on my to-do list? So those should go in the just don't ever do category. All right, and then I want you to also think about how valuable your time is. You know, everyone has only a set amount of time, and so realize that when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So think back to that reality check exercise and how you wanted to be spending your time, and look at the things that you are constantly signing up for, the additional opportunities that you're signing up for that are just taking away from those core things that you committed to or are now wanting to spend your time on. All right, so the next piece on the agenda is empowerment and really empowering your team. At Target, we have a process called Best Team Survey where we collect feedback upwards. So all the engineers and all the team members at Target fill out a survey every year, and it's basically reporting feedback up to leadership. And one of the topics that always bubbles up is empowerment and making sure that the people at the right level with the right level of information are the ones making the decision. And, I can relate. I'm sure you can relate. We've seen, the people who know most about these topics, who are on the front line, sometimes aren't the ones being heard and being part of those decisions at especially a large organization. And we have to make sure that we're not committing to work without engineers being part of that decision, being part of those topics. Has anyone heard of the iceberg of ignorance? Okay, so it's kind of hard to read, so I added some text along here. But so this is from Sidney Yoshida, and he did a study, I think it was in the 80s or even before, about at what level of information people really know the most in organizations. And so they say 100% of problems are known to those frontline employees. 9% of problems are known to middle management, and only 4% of problems are really well known to top managers. And so obviously this will vary based on organizations. Some have really, really awesome, transparent organization, but I think the larger, the harder it is to really make sure that leaders understand what the problems and issues and decisions that should be made on the ground level are. And so as a leader, make sure you're asking, what are the issues? What are your pain points? What is positive about this work? What do you enjoy, etc. And another thing I like to do is make sure that leaders and business partners are accessible to developers and vice versa. We used to have a lot of meetings, and I'm sure some of you can relate, where it was project managers and managers, all meeting and talking through dependencies, talking through requirements, and then they'd bring back those requirements to the developers and expect them just to pick it up and understand what they were talking about. And so I like to really provide team members with opportunities to go represent the team, answer questions, go represent our work, and talk through these technical complex issues. I find that it's a lot faster getting engineers in a room than product owners talking through especially complex technical issues. And it's especially disempowering when someone comes back with a decision and says, here, go work on this now. So I've heard from a lot of people that they want to be looped in early and they want to be able to define that vision from the start. And it is our job as leaders to make sure that can happen whenever possible. There's an awesome story about Steve Jobs and how he used to stop by engineers' desks the day after an incident had happened that impacted some of their customers. And he would stop by the engineer who maybe worked in that technology. And I was like, man, that would be absolutely terrifying, to have him stop by our desk. But when asked about it, he said, I don't want to play a game of telephone. I knew that this person would just have the best information. And so I was like, wow, that is so empowering. And what a cool leader who could just go to the person with the best information, answer that question, hear about their pain points, and move on, and not play a game of telephone between middle managers, etc. And at Target, our high-level leadership do something similar where every quarter, our CIO and a bunch of vice presidents of whatever area you're in will come and we'll do demos so that the engineers can demo the products that they're working on and ask leaders about their vision and vice versa. So that's another really awesome way to make sure that leaders and business partners are accessible to developers and vice versa. So I like to think about the different types of conversations that I'm involved in as a leader and really think about, who should participate in making this decision? Who will have to carry out the results of this decision? And then also, who will be impacted by this decision? And let's make sure that, if possible, these people are involved in this discussion. It really seems quite obvious. Okay, another awesome quote by Steve Jobs. It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do. And I truly believe that. It's quite impossible to stay up to date on technology as an engineering manager. And so that's why I hire just really, really awesome developers to build those creative solutions. And it would be really, really hard for them to continue thinking creatively and owning their work if we're just telling them what to do. And so the next activity that I want you to do with your partner is to think of what types of decisions or tasks are you doing right now that you can maybe push to your team. And on the flip side, think about those tasks that engineers or the junior level engineers don't want to do, and think about what you could free them up, and think about what types of tasks you could pick up that they're doing now that would allow them to focus on more meaningful work. So go ahead and chat with your partner for a couple minutes now and start brainstorming some of those. All right, moving on with our topic of empowering your team. A couple more tips here. I love this picture, it's so cute. Make sure that you're waiting for conversations to play out. So especially if you were an engineer on the team before, or have really grown up on that team and been on that team a long time, and now you're, a more seasoned or senior level, lead level, or engineering manager, make sure you're waiting for the conversations to play out to give junior level developers the opportunity to come up with a solution and think of new ideas themselves instead of always being the one, to bring up your idea. Has anyone read the book Multipliers by Liz Wiseman? No one. Okay. I recommend reading that book. So she talks about different types of leaders, so multipliers and diminishers. And multipliers are the types of leaders who really just multiply the genius around them because they're not always the one to offer their opinion, even if they might know the answer themselves. And then diminishers, are those ones who everyone looks to because they just know the answer. And so you're not making anyone any smarter or stronger around you if you're always the one offering up ideas. Okay? So here's a lovely quote from her book. Multipliers get more from their people because they are leaders who look beyond their own genius and focus their energy on extracting and extending the genius of others. So, if you're an engineering manager, especially, you're not an individual contributor anymore. So we have to stop sharing our own ideas and instead try to extract them from other people on the team. So I find that if I'm getting way too far into the details, I just have to get out. Another thing is to not be a micromanager. Someone shouted that out as a negative adjective to describe one of their bosses in the past. So how to figure out if you're a micromanager? Think about these questions. When you ask someone to do something, what level of detail are you providing? When someone starts on a task, how often are you following up with them? And then what is your reaction when someone deviates from the plan? So just kind of think of the answers to those questions and whether you might be a micromanager in some circumstances. Okay, so sometimes it's impossible to, push these tasks or activities or decisions to the team. And at that point, it's just really, really important as a leader to provide context. So whether that's providing context to the team about like an organizational business initiative that we just have to work on, maybe it's a financial decision that the organization made, maybe we have a contractual agreement with another company, maybe we're backing into a big advertising in stores that our team just has to back into. But absolutely make sure that your team understands how their work ties to the bigger picture and that they can articulate that in English or whatever your native language is. And sometimes it's also about providing that context up to leadership. So as the leader of your engineering team, it's also important to have the backs of your team and say, hey, we're going to work on this technical debt because our team just needs to do it. And providing that context to leadership is really, really vital in your role as a leader. So, hey, we have to address these performance concerns, and here's why that's important to you as a leadership team, etc. Okay, so what I've learned, in being a leader is that context is really, really important to people, and it really just helps to connect the dots. So, in hearing feedback from people, they want to know the why. Why are we working on this? I want to be bought into this vision and feel great about what I'm working on, and not just being told what they're doing. So on my teams, we have a weekly team huddle. So the 3 teams that I work for come together, and we have an agenda that usually goes like this. So it's my way to share context to the team and for them to also, share different commonalities that they can learn from each other. So our huddle agenda is we start with TIL. So today I learned, but we also say this week I learned. So I introduce this because I think it introduces a form of humility. So we usually come up with something, dumb, a dumb mistake that I made this week. Like, oh, I spent forever working through this React hook and implementing it. And here's what I learned. I don't want you to face the same thing. Then we go into organizational updates or context or vision. So that's where I have time to just share, here's what's going on with my peers. Here's what I'm hearing. Are you hearing any rumors? How can I help clarify anything while this whole group of developers is together? And then I also like to have guest speakers from other areas of the organization come in. So whether it's, we had a lead engineer from the stores team come in the other week just to show what they were working on so that the developers on my teams, which is supply chain technologies, can hear about and really understand how their work does tie into that bigger picture. So kind of think about what would your, team huddle agenda be? And are you comfortable bringing that idea back to your teams? All right, so kind of to recap, this theme is that leaders are great simplifiers. And to be a leader, you have to make sure that you're able to take, maybe a huge memo with a ton of information about why we're doing something and really scale it down to a note card of, hey, I'm going to tell you this one sentence about why this is important and why our team is working on this. And so leaders do have to be great simplifiers. And so I want you to think about this for your particular team, whether you're a senior engineer or the leader of that team, or even a junior level developer. Think about what context might you, yourself, or your team be missing that you need to learn about or that you need to communicate. And then also in one sentence, describe how your work does tie into the bigger picture of your organization. So I'll give you 2 minutes just to chat with your partner, try to answer those questions. Getting some eye rolls, but it's good practice. All right, hopefully that was helpful for you. if you found it hard to answer either of these questions, make sure you're taking a takeaway to go back and talk with your leader about, both of these questions and try to make sure that you can articulate these. Because I think that's really important and will make you feel a lot better about, what you're working for at your organization. All right. The next thing is, in the time management theme, is establishing a bulletproof morning routine. I've done a lot of research recently on time management and how to really make the most of your time and focus on the things that matter. And every single book I've read has at least one chapter on, mornings and how important they are for your day. I do truly believe that your mornings set the tone for the rest of your day, whatever role you're in. And so at the start of the days, figure out what kind of routine works well for you that can make you the most energized, the most excited to go to work and do what you're doing. And so I have a template in the handouts that are online that's worked well for me that you can fill out every day. But so what I like to do is walk through gratitude. So I just say, hey, I'm thankful for this. I write it down. It's really quick. It's a nice positive way to start your day. It's hard to have a bad day if you think about one thing you're grateful for in the morning. And then I walk through, if I had to finish one project today, what would it be? Obviously, there's a lot of things that are going to go on throughout the day, but if I look back at a successful day, what would that entail? What's one thing I want to complete? And then I like to plan hour by hour, so even though I let Outlook, manage my schedule, I also like to write it out so I can feel a little bit less intimidated by how I'll be navigating throughout my day, making sure that there's nothing that is overlapping and that everything's feasible to get to. And then at the end of the day, I like to think about, what did I actually spend my time on? What was I planning to spend my time on? What did I actually do? What can I improve? What went well today? What did I learn today? Etc. So it's kind of nice to look back if you do this for about 30 days and see, what activities or what habits did you do in the mornings that you felt great and in the days that you did accomplish what you wanted to. So I do encourage you to think about your mornings and think about how that does impact the rest of your day. I advise you to not just jump right into emails and start thinking about what other people want you to do. So I heard a quote that, emails are what other people want you to do and not what you actually want to do yourself. So establish your own bulletproof morning routine so that you can have the best day possible. Okay, social style. So this one might require, or if you don't have a pen, a really good memory. So we're going to go through a quiz, and you're going to answer each of these questions to learn about your social style. I promise it's a short one, but I first just want to talk about the importance of understanding your social style and understanding the social styles of the people around you. There's so many different ways that people interact with others and communicate and approach their work. And it's so important as a leader in technology, regardless if you have a formal leadership role, to really be in tune with and actually alter your communication style as you're interacting with various types of people. Okay, so the first step is to understand your own and how you might be perceived by others. Okay, so I'm going to go through these slowly. So there's going to be 3 questions on each page. And basically, you're just looking for themes of which A, B, C, or D that you're responding to. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do this first one, and then we have 2 more pages. Does anyone need more time on this one? Okay. Next one. Does anyone need a tiebreaker? If you have more, like if you have 2 letters that have the most and you want a tiebreaker, yeah. What? So 1 letter per question, and then add up how many of each letters you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I've chosen many more letters than,
Oh, okay. So none of them, or how many A's do you have?
well, 3 so far.
Okay. Oh, do you need time to finish?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so does everyone have their letter with the most responses tied to it? And does anyone need a tiebreaker? You need a tiebreaker? Okay. Okay. They're okay to read. I thought they'd be hard to read. Okay, so you can just go through the first 4 rows since we only have a couple of folks who need a tiebreaker. So for those who don't need a tiebreaker, just remember the letter that had the most for you. And for those who do need a tiebreaker, go through these first 4 rows and then write down the row number, so 1, 2, 3, or 4, for the word that best describes you. And I'll translate that to A, B, or C in a second. Yeah.
What's exacting mean?
Exacting. Which column is that in? Exacting. I think about exacting as kind of like precise, like I'm going to do what I told you I would do.
We should choose one from each column, right?
So go through each horizontal line, and 1 column per horizontal line. So I'm going to choose between bold, enthusiastic, careful, and patient. Which of those 4 words best describes you? Yep. And so just go through the first 4 lines. Okay, so for those who needed a tiebreaker, do you have the number that you have the most responses to on here? Okay, so column 1 is C, column 2 is D, column 3 is A, and column 4 is B. Does that help you, or are you even more confused? Oh, yeah, yep. We'll spend more time on this one. Yeah, and if you need, you can go through all of them if you're... But which one best describes you?
Oh, I needed a tiebreaker between A and B, but these columns tell me that C and D are my style.
Did you have any A or B's in these?
Barely.
Well, which one did you have more of?
What was that? The mapping again from the letters and numbers? A, I suppose.
Okay, then choose that, because this one's a little less formal, whereas the first one is a little bit more accurate. So use this as a tiebreaker, but not as your first.
For me, they match.
Okay. Oh, okay. So do you have your letter now?
No, I have 2 letters with the same.
Okay, so did you go down you can do more of these if you want to, yeah. And it's fine, as you hear about them, you might figure out which one best resonates with you too, so that might help clarify. So yeah, don't get too stressed, it's okay. Okay, does anyone need more time on this one? Okay. All right, so we went over here. So now hopefully everyone has the letter that they associate with. Okay. Oh, do you need this? Everyone have their A, B, C, or D? Okay. So here are the social styles that I'll be working through now, and which one you align to based on A, B, C, or D. So A, analytical, B, amiable, C, driver, or D, expressive. So there's a ton of different social style quizzes online. I liked this one the best because it's really clear, defines 4 simple types of roles based on characteristics that I'll walk through shortly. But I do encourage you to take a more extensive one too when you get back, and also encourage your team members to do the same thing so that you can all kind of understand everyone's social style. Okay, so here's where they chart on a map of whether they prefer tasks or people, and then whether they naturally ask or tell more. Now I'll walk through each different style. I'll let you take photos of that too. Okay, so driver. Drivers are action and goal-oriented. They strive for results and react quickly. They are decisive, independent, disciplined, practical, and efficient. They rarely want to waste time on personal talk and can be perceived by other styles as dominating, harsh, or severe. They are comfortable in positions of power and control. So at best, they are honest, strong-willed, independent, practical, efficient, and determined. And at worst, they are harsh, controlling, abrasive, pushy, or maybe power-seeking. Now, the analytical. Analyticals are concerned with being organized, having all the facts, and being careful before taking action. They need to be accurate, precise, orderly, and methodical. They conform to standard operating procedures, organizational rules, and historical ways of doing things. They are comfortable in positions in which they can check facts and figures and be sure that they are right. So at best, they are efficient, focused, realistic, independent, and determined. And at worst, they are critical, indecisive, hard to please, or unemotional. Amiable. Amiables need cooperation, personal security, and acceptance. They are uncomfortable and will avoid conflict at all costs. They value personal relationships, helping others, and being liked. Some amiables will sacrifice their own desires to win approval from others. They focus on opinions rather than facts and data. So at best, they are loyal, they are supportive, respectful, dependable, and perceptive. And at worst, they might be needy, unsure, dependent, and easily manipulated. The expressive. Expressives enjoy involvement, excitement, and interpersonal interaction. They are sociable, stimulating, enthusiastic, and good at involving and motivating others. They are idea-oriented, have little concern for routine, and are focused on the future and have quick reaction times. They need to be accepted by others and tend to be spontaneous, outgoing, energetic, and friendly. They are focused on people rather than tasks. At best, expressives are ambitious, energizing, inspiring, enthusiastic, visionaries, fun-loving, influential, and friendly. At worst, they are overbearing, unrealistic, attacking, undisciplined, and manipulative. Okay, diving a little deeper into each one. Driver might be obsessed by compulsion to perform, are really passionate for knowledge. They work at a fast pace. They like to be in charge and productive. They measure personal worth by how much they do. They're irritated by indecision and inefficiencies, and they're able to deal with tough interactions. Under pressure, they will assert themselves strongly and dictate the way things are going to be. Now, the analyticals, which I think are probably have a big population in this room, have a strong sense of duty and obligation. They're steadfast, reliable, and dependable. They have a forceful work ethic. They prefer an atmosphere that encourages careful preparation, do not like surprises. Main priority is the job at hand, and under pressure, they will withdraw and avoid contact with causes of stress. Amiable is that typical, works well with others. They avoid confrontation. They're a strong and loyal team player. They're good listeners and sensitive to others' feelings. They prefer an atmosphere that encourages strong relationships. They like to have direction. They want to be appreciated, and they seek deep meaning in relationships and experiences. The expressives are friendly and easygoing. They work at fast and spontaneous paces. They might struggle with commitment and follow through. They prefer an atmosphere that encourages flexibility. They want to be admired. They're visionaries. They enjoy trying new and different things, and they're happy-spirited. So how do they talk? Drivers will say, I will. Analyticals will say, I think. Amiables might say, I feel. And expressives might say, I want. Communication styles. Drivers might be louder, use their voice to emphasize points, talk fast, states and commands, can be outspoken or formal. Analyticals might be quieter. The voice might not vary that much. They might be specific and concise and clear and logical. Amiables would be quieter. The voice also doesn't vary that much, might have dreamy thoughts, might seem a little vague and informal. Expressives are louder, uses voice to emphasize points, animated and excited, and informal. Body language. Drivers lean forward, have intense eye contact sometimes, and deliberate movements. Whereas analyticals might lean back, have limited eye contact, and limited gestures. Amiables also might lean back, have some facial expressions, good eye contact, and regular gestures. And then the expressives will lean forward, have controlled facial expressions, good eye contact, and lots of gestures. The way that they engage and listen, so drivers might be poor listeners. They want to control the conversation and might interrupt and like to summarize. Analyticals will listen but might appear as though they're not. Amiables are good listeners, reacts to what you're saying and appears to care. Expressives listens, reacts to what you're saying, and might talk a lot. Work preference, and here's why I think it's really, really interesting, especially as a leader, to make sure that the folks on your team are in the right, working styles and the right environments where they can really thrive in their social style. Okay, so drivers, works in priority order, might multitask, are intense and driven, and like to generate ideas. Whereas the analyticals are more thorough, have a strong attention to detail, likes step-by-step procedures, and concentrates on one thing at a time. Amiables are easygoing and cooperative, always willing to be of service, goes with the flow, and no strong sense of urgency. And then the expressives might be unstructured, prefers freedom, and lots of people interaction. Okay, so this is kind of a lot of text here, but like I said, I like to think about the different people on my team. And also I like to think about the people who I find difficult to work with and figure out how I could maybe improve this relationship. So if you go in the categories, primary asset, I like to look at backup behavior. So, when they're feeling attacked or not feeling equal as part of an equation, like how will they react and how will that be perceived? For example, analyticals are going to avoid confrontations. Amiables are people that will give in. Drivers might try to take over. Expressive people might attack or get defensive easily. So if you notice this behavior, that's when you realize that it's time to really modify your behavior so that you're not, pulling up their backup behavior. And so when you're trying to adjust, you can use this chart, obviously not in the moment. It's good to practice and not pull this out as you're talking with somebody. But find the column for the social style of the person that you're engaging with or engage with a lot, and find the corresponding, make an effort to be more to support their blank. So for an example, make an effort to be more accurate with analyticals to support their principles and thinking. Or make an effort to be more cooperative to support amiables, relationships, and feelings. And you can kind of go through the rest and think about, where the people on your team fit, or where are the people that you interact with on a daily basis, maybe your family members, maybe your partner, et cetera, maybe your friends, and how they fit, and how you can really be a better leader by adapting the way that you interact with them to suit their social styles. They find that, the happiest people at work are in roles that really, really do support and enhance their social styles instead of detract from them. So your ability to adapt as a leader is really, really vital, especially on an engineering team. So I like to just give people the opportunity to think about, where all of their other team members lie on this. And obviously that you don't want to assume anyone is where anyone is, but it might be a little easier to, after thinking through the different social styles, kind of think about where they might be. And even better yet, do one of these social style quizzes with your team. All right, so that wraps up social styles. So now we have an opportunity for a break. So I'm thinking we'll give it 10 minutes. So let's come back at 2:50. So 14:50, please. Thank you. All right. And we're back. Happy to see a lot of people came back after the break. That's a great sign. I ran into someone in the hall on the way back, and I always like to get feedback because it's so hard to read the room, especially at a tech conference. This isn't your typical session, so I hope you're getting something out of it, and I really, really appreciate the participation. Okay, now we will talk about giving feedback. And what?
May I ask the styles you just gave a moment ago?
Yes.
How often do you validate that people are still in there?
How often do you validate? Like, how often should you retest?
Yeah, because people can
Change. And I find, too, you change whether you're at work or home, too. You kind of put on different styles based on what environment you're in. I don't know, maybe every quarter, a couple times a year. I don't have, like, a recurring time. In fact, I haven't done this one with my new team yet, so I'm not the best advice giver. But, yeah, I'd say quarterly I would encourage you to do if your team's comfortable with it. And it can be, like, an opt-in thing, like, just schedule an hour, be like, hey, I'm going to do this. If anyone's interested, come along. But yeah, to your point, people change, and the way that you interact with others, and especially what environment you're in, can change the way your social style.
From your experience, do you also have some experience on when the team, the cohesion of the team changes? Someone gets a new one.
That can, and that's why, okay, so the question was, if someone were to leave the team or someone were to join the team, how does the environment change? And it changes drastically, even if you're not like speaking directly to it or noticing it, like it does. And so that's why I think it's even more vital to like know everyone's social style and how they're going to react to those changes and how they're interacting with each other and this new person and, what that person's social style is and how they best interact with people. I think like say there's a really strong driver on a team and that driver leaves, like someone might pick up and become more of a driver, be more confident in leading the team and have that opportunity. So I think that's a really, really interesting dynamic. And that's why, to your point, it's really beneficial to take it frequently because your environment changes, what you're working on changes, the product partners who you're working with might change, like people adapt. And so it's important just to, take a pulse of this quite frequently. So yeah, that's a great question. I haven't had that one before. Thank you. Cool. All right, feedback. Feedback is uncomfortable, and so that's why I like to talk about it. So why do you think feedback is so uncomfortable? Why don't you shout out some responses here? Why is it so difficult?
Because you can take it personally.
You can take it personally. You don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Yeah.
It doesn't feel comfortable.
It's you feel uncomfortable while you're giving it and receiving it, right? Both, yeah. You don't feel qualified giving it. That's interesting. Why not?
Because I'm a junior developer, and whenever giving feedback to a senior developer, I think they should know better than me, so why am I giving them feedback?
Sure. I think that's so interesting because wisdom, so like, years of experience, etc., in my opinion, does not make anyone more or less qualified to give feedback. Like, that's why it's so cool to bring in new junior level developers because they have new ideas and they can bring that really, really, really positive and, important feedback. So I encourage you, and hopefully this will make it seem a little less intimidating to find approaches to give people feedback, especially upwards feedback. Can be really approachable if you phrase it the right way. So hopefully you can have something to take away from that. But thank you so much. That's a common one too. Is like, well, I'm not in any position to give anyone feedback. What else?
Objectivity, you call it, like to be objective from both, like from the one giving it and the one receiving it.
Yeah.
And the one giving it, so do not mix like I don't like what you did instead of I don't like you, and the one listening also like okay, he didn't like the way you might handle this, but doesn't mean that he doesn't like me as a person. I think that's also an issue.
Yeah. Objective.
Both giving it and the one who receives it.
Yeah, so kind of like, I don't want you to take this personally, like, here's how I interpreted the situation. And yeah, being objective with feedback is hard.
Manager, he was so cool that he told me, man, people don't realize when I'm giving them negative feedback. He
Oh,
was so like, gentle, and then he said, like, people don't realize that I'm telling them something negative.
sure. Which might be a good quality. That's interesting. Yeah?
Different people require or appreciate different kinds of feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, different people require. I think require is the right word, and prefer different types of feedback based on their social style, based on their circumstance, whatever that means, based on the situation. Different types of feedback is more appropriate and less appropriate in different times.
So it's important how you start.
It's important how you start it, like how you.
Like if somebody's told it to you, like, I don't want to take it personally, you already think about that. When somebody want to explain you the situation that you have it and it just jump to the problem, you will not take it personally. So that it's important how you start as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So how you bring up the feedback, or ask the person if you can give them feedback on a particular situation. Yeah. You say?
As a leader, do you think that you need to balance it out? Like, if I'm going to give somebody a negative feedback, well, it can be always constructive, even if it's negative, but also mention something that they're doing good.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that it's always okay. Am I doing something right or not?
Absolutely. Yep. I don't believe in the sandwich. So there's the feedback sandwich. Like, I don't believe you always have to start and end with positive feedback. But yeah, I think there's obviously things that you value about someone and what they bring to the table. So like reminding them, hey, you're really, really good at this. And I actually have a formula for this later in a slide, but like, I want to remind you that these are the strengths you bring to the table, but here are the things we need to work on. So yeah, having a healthy balance of like, I'm not always giving you negative feedback and you're not ever meeting expectations. Like, there's got to be something that the person is doing right that we can then harness and grow on. So yeah, I think it's important to have a balance, but not totally balanced. Like, you also can't, lie to someone and make them think that they're doing a good job, because that's, unkind to not approach that negative feedback too. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into this. So the first thing, and kind of to your point, is, what does that person need at this given situation? And it's really important to think about your intention as you're giving feedback. So does that person really need feedback or advice? I read this awesome article about just switching the word feedback to advice, and it can be really, really powerful. So if you want to highlight what someone can improve on and talk through how to improve on it, you're actually giving advice, right? You're not giving feedback one way, because you're talking through it. If someone needs positive reinforcement, or if they are someone who simply just missed the mark, then basic feedback, so one-way feedback, might do the trick. Okay, so let's talk through both of those scenarios. Like I said, changing that word from feedback. So, one, asking for, can I get some advice or can I get some feedback? I like to respond with, oh yeah, like, let's talk about the situation. Maybe I can give you some advice. I always like to start with advice, because that seems like a much more positive word in a conversation. So, when you're giving advice, like I said, you're asking questions to find out what the issue is, what the challenges are, what the pain points are. And oftentimes that sparks from something you observed. And that's why I think it's really important to, like you said, be objective and say, hey, I want to understand more about this before I just give you some feedback based on, how I interpreted the situation. And so that's why I love giving advice instead of just straight up feedback. Now, regardless of its feedback or advice, I like to talk about this piece of feedback or advice like it's something outside of both of us. So, as the manager, as the team member, we're talking about this thing that's outside of both of us. We're both looking at it together and going to hopefully work through it together, and not put it just on that person to work through independently. So whether you need to write it on the board or on a piece of paper, hey, this is the thing we're talking through, to make it more clear that you're on their side with this, that you're helping them through it, especially if you're their direct leader. Okay, and so like I said, feedback to me seems a lot more one-sided. So, you're providing it to that team member. So maybe you're talking through advice, and then you get done understanding the situation, then you say, okay, now I'm going to give you some feedback on what I think. And that's the appropriate time to say, okay, I think I have enough information, and here is the feedback I would provide based on this certain situation, etc. Now, in general, like we said, feedback is uncomfortable, so your job as the leader is to really just try to minimize discomfort while also making sure that you're getting the point across. And so a couple characteristics of great feedback or great advice to me mean that number one, it's framed in context. So, hopefully you've talked to the situation already in that same meeting, but if not, if you're approaching them, you want to say, hey, I want to talk about yesterday at this meeting or yesterday when we were doing this code review, etc. Make sure they know the context for which particular situation you're talking about. The next thing is genuine, especially for kudos. You don't want to come off, sarcastic as you're giving kudos. And so this really also means sharing your real feelings about the behavior. So, I feel frustrated when I'm trying to make a point and you continue finishing my sentences, etc. So that's where sharing those I's and how it's impacting you as the sender is really, really vital here, and that you're being genuine. Next thing is timely. So, don't wait until your next one-on-one or until your next performance review to share feedback. Make sure you're doing it as soon as possible. So maybe it's right after the occurrence. You can, hop over and say, hey, do you mind if we talk about how this went? Actionable, like I said, you are both working through it together, especially if you're that person's leader. I think even if, you're a peer of that person or a junior level developer, you can say, how can I help you with this? Here are the situations that I've been through that are kind of similar. Like, how do you want me to help you work through this together? So now a pattern or formula that I feel works best to make it the least uncomfortable and kind of the most actionable is to walk through, first of all, the behavior. So here's the behavior we're talking about. You're giving them the context. Hopefully it's timely. Hopefully it's genuine. Here's the behavior that you exhibited. Here's the outcome of that behavior. So what happened as a result of this behavior? As a junior level developer, hey, I saw, that you were talking over that person in the meeting. And, as a junior level developer, it made me feel not necessarily as confident to bring up my own ideas because I was worried that you would also talk over me. What was the outcome of that behavior from that person? And then what are the next steps? So, as next steps, just hopefully try to make sure that you're letting people speak their minds and that you're giving them time to get their thoughts out without talking over them. Okay, so, as a leader, I like to think about what am I paying attention to and what opportunities am I looking for to give people feedback. Now, I think it's much more valuable being on a team with amazing lead and principal engineers that I'm actually paying attention to behaviors and passion instead of content and status updates. So I think it's more important, and again, this depends on the team, absolutely. Maybe you're a manager who does a lot of code reviews and have to be that one to share that type of feedback. But I think it's a lot more important in my role to pay attention to behaviors and process instead of content, like I said. So for example, the way you handle that situation or the way you came across in that meeting instead of, the code that you are writing, X, Y, and Z. I like to lead code reviews to other engineers on the team to do together, to do peer code reviews, to have a leadership technical role, do code reviews, and I really try to focus on behaviors and passion. And I've also learned the hard way that you have to make sure that you're in a mental state to give that feedback. So if it is something that personally offended you and you need to practice maybe giving that feedback or having that conversation, make sure that you're not the one, to bring that up right away. And instead maybe pull a mentor, practice giving that feedback and see how you would respond if certain things trigger you throughout that conversation. Okay, so how do we initiate feedback? Here are a couple ways that will hopefully make it an uncomfortable and not a comfortable situation where the person knows that they are about to receive feedback and can acknowledge that they approve and it's a good time to receive feedback. So the first one is, I'd like to give you some feedback. Is now a good time? Just straight up. Do you have a moment to catch up on how this situation went? Or, can we talk about this? What do you think is going well or what didn't go well? Now, here are some examples. I've noticed that you struggled to complete your stories the past 2 sprints, so that's the behavior I'm observing. Here is how it impacted. So here is the outcome. It impacted the rest of the team because their work was dependent on those components that you were building. Let's work together to figure this out and make sure that you're set up to optimize your time going forward, including any resources you need for me to complete the work. Now, next steps. In addition to sprint planning, I'd like to sit down and walk through the stories you pick up so that we can ensure you have everything you need, whether it's help from a senior engineer, access, etc. I'd also request that you use your daily stand-ups to highlight any blockers that you see preventing you from getting the work done. Now, some bad versus good forms of feedback. Your stand-ups are very confusing to us. We need you to share better ones in the future. Good. Your stand-up updates aren't as clear as we need them to be. From now on, please share specific tasks that you are working on and call out any blockers that could impact your progress. If you want, we can sit down and walk through examples of good stand-up updates tied specifically to your work. Now, I promised I would share a formula here and how to really highlight those strengths the team members bring while also saying, hey, we need to work on this. So I like to say, I value you because of this, or here are your key strengths that we need to continue working on, but we also need to work on this. So I think you could be even more effective if you X, Y, and Z. So that's kind of a really positive way to spin feedback, right? Is to say, here's what you're great at, and here's what we could work even more on. Love Brené Brown, so she has this awesome quote in one of her books. I love this because I'm from Minnesota. I don't know if you guys know the stereotypes, but we're Minnesota nice. We don't like confrontation. We don't like to give feedback. It's very uncomfortable. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. But what I've learned and what's been really, really hard for me personally is that it is actually unkind as a leader to not give feedback. Okay, so I'll give you a chance to read that amazing quote by Brené Brown. And in the same book, she talks about feedback, and they did some studies. And so they said, obviously we've talked about how uncomfortable feedback is. And they did this study to figure out just how long that really intense feeling of discomfort actually lasts. And they said it's an average of only 8 seconds. So, once you start talking and the person understands where you're going with this, it just gets a little bit more comfortable because it's a dialogue. And so you can go through 8 seconds of anything. So just make sure that make sure that you're choosing that short moment of discomfort to really give this team member what they deserve, which is that valuable feedback to improve. Sounds like there's a bird in here. Okay. Is that just in my I don't know. Okay, so getting into the interactive part of the giving feedback section, I want you to think about a feedback situation that you're avoiding. And I know that you have something, regardless of level in your organization, maybe a conversation that you really want to have with someone, something that's been bothering you, an outcome on the team that they are impacting as that person. So I want you to think about a feedback situation, a potential feedback situation that you're right now avoiding. Think about why you're avoiding it, and then also what is there to gain if you successfully address that situation. So I'll give you a couple minutes to think about that and to tell your partner what that situation is, and make sure that you have one, because we're actually going to spend the next 10 minutes on this same situation. So I'll give you some time to think about that, okay? I'll give you 2 minutes to exchange ideas. And it can be with a friend or a family member too. Can you raise your hand if you need more time? Okay, Thanks. All right, raise your hand if you still need more time. Okay. Okay. Now it's time to practice. Everyone's going to do it. All right, so I have a stopwatch. You are going to get 2 minutes each to practice giving this feedback. So as a reminder, here is a template for what formula to follow. Make sure you have context. Obviously, it's not timely at this point. Make sure it's genuine. Make sure that you're, talking about outcomes to you, to the team, and then next steps that you can work with that person moving forward. All right, so first person gets to start, and if you finish early, the other person can just give you feedback on how you did. So 2 minutes, so meta. Not 1 hour. Wait, not 59 minutes. Okay. Go. Person number 1, go. 2 minutes. Getting the candid. Halfway done with the first person. Hopefully you're writing down what worked well too, so you can go back and actually try this. All right. Next person, your turn. 2 minutes. Yes. Yes. He gets to do his own scenario. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep. So you just switch. Yep. Okay, go. 2 minutes. So you're each doing your own scenario. Okay, 2 minutes. Hopefully that felt productive to practice and gain a little confidence as you return to work or return to this family member or friend. And I really, really encourage you to have the courage to move forward and give that feedback to that person, because it is kind to give feedback. Okay, we are going to move on now. So, recognition. Obviously, as a leader, it's really important to give recognition, acknowledge the positive things that everyone does on the team. And one thing that I like to be aware of, especially at a large company, is that we do have to associate names with accomplishments, because developers can quite often get lost, especially at a big company, in what they're doing. And so I like to talk about, this person worked on this feature, which enabled this huge enterprise initiative. So I like to make sure that I'm really championing and being the voice for all the developers on my team as I'm talking with other leaders, as I'm talking with, other development teams, etc. And another thing to note is that not all recognition looks the same. I think that someone called this out here before. And so it's really important to get to know all the members of your team and what they prefer for being recognized. So I've learned that not everyone wants to be, recognized publicly at an all-team meeting with 100 plus people. And some people really love that. Some people just prefer a direct message saying, hey, you did an awesome job. Some want donuts, whatever that looks like. Make sure that when new people join your team, you're asking them, how do you prefer to be recognized? Another thing is to make sure that as leaders, we are addressing low performers. And this is absolutely one of the hardest and worst parts of the job. Definitely not fun, but it is amazing what it can do to morale, both negatively if we don't address these low performers and positively if we do. So I found that you can really gain respect from the team if you do address these low performers as the leader. And so, make sure that you're partnering. Hopefully you have a HR organization. And if not, make sure that you're also doing the due diligence for this team member to write out a really concrete and fair action plan for them to improve with specific feedback for what they're not doing well and aligned to what your expectations of that team member are. And then, if they're still not cutting and if they're still not improving, then make sure that you're helping them find an opportunity to, leave that organization. But make sure that you are addressing low performers. As people attending conferences, I'm sure you are all high performers, so you know how frustrating it is to see, someone on your team just keeping their job if they're a low performer. So as a leader, make sure that you are being accountable to the health of the team to address those low performers. Another interesting thing as a flip side is to let go of your superstars. So, we know, like I mentioned, that people are staying on teams shorter and shorter and staying in organizations shorter and shorter. So about 2 to 2.5 years so for the average software developer. And I've seen a lot of leaders just really try to hold on to their best engineers and bribe them to stay on their teams, not realizing that they're outgrowing their environments. And so I like to make sure that I'm talking to every single engineer and understanding, what skills are you still trying to build? What experience are you trying to get? What business areas are you interested in? And if I can't find those opportunities for them on my team, I try to connect them with another manager, hopefully within our organization, that can provide those opportunities. And so in your one-on-ones, make sure that you're addressing this and thinking about, those superstars on your team and what they really need to continue growing. Because it doesn't help anyone to hold on to those superstars and let them outgrow their environments. So this can just be a takeaway, but think about the superstars on your team and who are they? And, what can you do for them to make sure that they are getting all the experiences and opportunities to continue growing and really reaching their potential? All right, so career conversations. We've kind of talked through, personally, how do you help people, but also career-wise, what are some tools that you can use to facilitate great career conversations? I find it's really difficult in tech considering it's always changing. You can say, you want to learn, about this latest Java version, or you want to be really proficient in X, Y, and Z CI/CD pipeline tool or whatever that is, but those become outdated really fast. And so how do you help people really navigate their careers and become stronger developers? So I like to use this tool. So it's an axis of skills and drive. And so I like to, maybe every quarter think about where every developer falls on my team. So whether their skills are really, really high or their drive is really high and their skills are low. So where do they fall in this axis? So, if their skills are really high and their drive seems to be kind of low, maybe they're bored. Or, if their drive and their potential is really, really high and they're really excited about the work, but their skills are lower, then get them some training. There's things that you can do to help these people based on where they fall here. Like I mentioned, it's hard to have career conversations a lot of times with software developers. And so what I like to do is go through some of these different conversations. I've done these recently with a couple of members on my team, and it was really effective to, map out where are they now and where do they want to get to. So these are on the website. And so the first one highlights, what are you good at now and what brings you energy? Because not everything that you're good at brings you energy and vice versa. And then what do you want to learn more about? So this is a really tactical tool to say okay, here are some opportunities we can get you in your current role to grow in these things or to make sure that you're working on things that do energize you. And then there's the goal setting one. So it starts with if you could have any job in the world, what would that be? And then gets a little bit more granular to how do we get you some similar experiences in your current role? And then I love this 3 conversations one. So you basically talk about, their whole life. It's a series of 3 different meetings and say, where did you come from? And as a leader, you can analyze the different decisions they made throughout their life to try to think about, what's important to them in their job and what kind of organization would best suit their needs. So again, you can find these on the website and print them out and hopefully have them with your team members. All right, one-on-ones. One-on-ones are difficult, and I used to really dread them when I first became a manager because I felt like I had to really prepare for them and be the one talking and make sure we have an agenda to talk through. And I wanted to avoid all the awkward silences, as everybody does. But one thing I noticed was that I just need to stop talking. And this was actually a struggle for me. When I first started in my role, like I said, I would really just want to be prepared and make sure that I could get them the best information for that one-on-one. But what I didn't realize, and it seems very obvious, is that these one-on-ones are for the team members and not for me. This is their opportunity to speak their minds, to share their ideas, to solicit feedback, and share feedback with me. And so I found that I just had to stop talking and be okay with that awkward silence for a little bit, and instead use some prompting questions to facilitate the conversation when needed. I actually added this just this morning because I read this article from Claire Liu, who is the CEO of Know Your Team, which is a really cool app I just discovered too. But she says a one-on-one meeting isn't a reporting session. It's not an accountability tool. A one-on-one meeting is your radar. It's your metal detector. It's one of the only ways you have to unearth what's actually going on in your team and what an employee is thinking and feeling. Especially if you have a fully remote team, like it's impossible to know what's going on in the various interactions and how the health of the team and get that pulse for how everyone is doing. And so that's what one-on-ones are for. And so don't consider them a status update because that's what stand-ups and Slack and whatever tools you use to share, one-way communication are for, not for the one-on-ones. Another thing I learned is, like I said, just listen. And that also means listening without distractions. And so especially when we're face-to-face, like no cell phones, no laptops, I'm not checking my Apple Watch, I want to be fully present. And so I've actually had those times where I wasn't, mentally present. There was something on my mind and I had to apologize and say, I'm not going to be fully present today. Can we do this tomorrow? Because this X, Y, and Z is on my mind. And vice versa too. So I think that the presence of these technologies are, even themselves, even if you're not looking at them, are kind of distracting. So if possible, have your one-on-one with nothing present, no cell phones, no laptops, etc. Because leaders have to be great listeners. Like I said, they focus their attention on the other person without distraction. They ask follow-up questions to clarify and further understand what the person is saying. They can paraphrase and clarify. And then they also have to listen and observe that person's energy, mood, and tone of voice. And these are a lot of the skills that you really do need training and practice, that emotional intelligence, to start building those skills when you become a leader. So, do they have high or low energy compared to usual? What is their body language? What are their gestures saying about how they're actually feeling? What isn't being said here? And for one-on-ones, for me, I know this varies significantly based on the person and the team, but I like to make sure that they're regularly scheduled, so minimum every other week for 30 minutes. They're rarely missed, so if we do have to miss it, let's reschedule it very soon, within the same week if possible. And then they're also, like I said, focused on the team member and not the leader. All right, so here's just also a template that you can also find on the website if you want to print that out and just, go through team member, the personal updates. I always like to ask about personal updates, and I'll share a little bit more about when we talk about authenticity, what the manager has to bring, and then, any action items out of that one-on-one. Okay, like I said, there's some questions that you can use to get the conversation started to avoid that awkward silence. I like to ask, what is on your mind? And I like this one because it says, let's talk about what matters the most to you right now at this given moment. I like it because they don't know what you're talking about. They think you might be referring to something else and you don't know what they're about to talk about. So it's a really good thing to say, let's talk about what matters. And I've actually never had anyone just be completely silent and say, nothing. At work, my husband does sometimes, but not at work. There's always something that is on their mind that week that we could talk about. Say more. I love saying this, even if I think I understand what they're saying. I like asking this because I do think it leads to, more profoundly deeper and more productive conversations. Because context and details really, really matter, as we talked about before. So ask people to say more, to elaborate on what they're talking about. And I always, always, always end with, how can I help this week? And that's where, in my opinion, that servant leadership is so powerful. Like, how can I help you? I like this one because, one, you're not forcing them you are forcing them to make a clear and direct request for how you can help them. And that feels so productive to me. And then number two, you don't think that you know what they need. I think a lot of our time is spent doing things that we assume people need, and it's just so powerful to say, hey, how can I help you? What can I do for you this week? Okay, so we have a lot of other great one-on-one questions that you can also use, so those are also in that handout. Feel free to bring those to your next one-on-one with your leader or your, direct reports to get the conversation going too. All right, so switching gears here, but kind of tied to one-on-one because you might be a coach in some of your one-on-ones, but we're going to talk about coaching and how valuable that skill set is. All right, so when I talk about coaching, I'm referring to the process of supporting individuals to make conscious decisions. The ultimate goal of coaching is to help someone move to a decision or behavior while learning, growing, and developing. And it really helps a person move from awareness into action. Now, I do think there's a time and a place for coaching versus instructing, which we'll talk about later as well. But by asking questions, we can help identify, gain insight, define a path forward, and then establish accountability. And so I also have a series of different questions to help you get through this process. Now, on the other hand, like I said, instructing is also used and appropriate sometimes. And so we're going to practice the difference between instructing and coaching. And so I'm going to give you some more tools once you get to coaching, but I think instructing is a little bit more familiar to you. So we're going to start with that so you can see what that feels like versus coaching. Okay, so we're going to switch off again. One person can be the instructor, and you're going to ask the other person, what is a challenge at work you are facing? You're going to listen for 30 seconds. I'm going to tell you after 30 seconds is done. And then when I tell you to go, you're going to tell the person what you think they should do for a minute, okay? Hang on, let me pull this up again. We got 30 seconds. Person one, go. Ask them, what is a challenge at work you are facing? Okay, now the other person, you have 1 minute to instruct them, give them advice on what you think they should do. All right, now I want the other person, excuse me. You have 30 seconds to tell the other person about something that is challenging you at your work. Go. So we're flipping opportunities. All right, now you have 1 minute to instruct the person on what you think they should do to address this challenge at work. All right. So now you can kind of feel what it's like to both be the instructor and also be on the receiving end of being, instructed to and being given advice to. All right. Now this is going to be really, really challenging. I promise it'll be hard. But we're going to go into the coaching exercise. And before you start, I just want to say coaching is only asking questions. You're going to find yourself wanting to give advice and wanting to offer up solutions, but you cannot give anything other than a question, okay? I'm going to give you some examples of questions, and it actually helps to go through this series. So first identify, then gain insight, talk about a path forward, and then address accountability or establish accountability. And again, as the coach, you're only asking questions. It's going to feel very awkward at first. Okay, so we're going to do... Same thing. We'll skip the 30 seconds because you already know the other person's challenge. The first coach is going to ask questions for 2 minutes. The other person can respond, but the coach can only ask questions. All right, 2 minutes starts now. All right, we're going to switch partners, switch coaches. Remember, as coach, you're only asking questions. Go. All right. Thanks for playing along, everybody. Now, I want to ask, how did it feel to be coached versus instructed?
It was quite hard to only do the question part.
Yeah, it's quite hard to be a coach, right? To only ask questions when you feel like you want to give some options or some ideas. Yeah. Yeah. How about on the receiving end, though? How did it feel to be coached? Yeah. 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 Anyone else have any observations of how it felt to be instructed versus asked questions? You like coaching more? Yeah, it's more of a dialogue. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because you come up with the ideas yourself, right? Like, it's pretty powerful to be like, wow, I do have the answers. You just have to be asked the right questions. I think it's really, really, really empowering to people to coach instead of instruct. But I think there's also, like I said, a time and a place to coach versus instruct. Okay, so when do we coach? Let me know if this resonates with you, because I came up with this, and I would love feedback, because I'm trying to come up with a diagram that resonates. But I think it makes sense to coach when you have that seasoned rock star, when they are already skilled, mostly just to like check in if they need help and talk through a particular situation. And additionally, when they're confident about something, but there's something maybe in the way. Now, as we're going further down, sometimes it helps to give some instruction but still be the coach when they're somewhat familiar with the task. But then there's times and places, like I said, to instruct, to train, to teach when it's a brand new task at hand. And that's when it's your job as a leader to offer advice, to say, hey, I've been through that before, let me talk you through what I did, etc., instead of coaching if it's a brand new task for somebody. And so before you coach somebody, ask yourself, do I really believe what this person has, that they have what it takes to resolve this and to be coached and to come up with a solution by themselves? And then can I suspend any negative beliefs that I have about this person as I'm coaching them? Do I stick to the facts as I coach this person, or do I kind of let them lead us in a different way and talk through what's on their mind, even if it's not true? And then am I able to clear my mind of any history this person and I have had as I'm coaching them? And like I said, here's another visual of what it looks like and when to coach versus instruct. So, as an engineering manager, maybe you have all that knowledge of that particular thing, and it doesn't make sense, to coach them on maybe learning a new language or technology. That's probably not an appropriate time to coach someone, because it's going to take a lot longer, and they probably don't have, what it takes in their mind. They need a lot more resources to learn something new. So if your knowledge as a leader is a lot higher and is on this triangle, then it just sometimes makes sense to teach. Whereas, if the engineer has all those ideas and it's in there and you just have to get it out and they have that potential already, then use that opportunity to coach. All right, we are going to enter into the last section here on the agenda, which is authenticity. So hopefully you have a lot of awesome takeaways when it comes to coaching, when to coach, when to instruct. It's definitely something that you have to practice, because, like I said, it's not natural. It feels like you just want to give some advice, but it's really, really empowering to people, and they do enjoy coming up with those ideas and those decisions independently, just by being prompted with questions. Okay, so for authenticity. As leaders, we have to make sure that we are never devaluing people in the process of delivering technical solutions. Obviously, we're accountable and responsible for delivering features to the business, etc. But in my opinion, our job is first and foremost to focus on the people and the happiness of the developers and engineers on our teams. I found that when it comes to humans, abstraction is bad. We're not in assembly lines anymore. What someone can produce and what someone is worth at work is a lot more complex than we can safely put numbers around. I think that value is described in so many different ways. And so to me, this means that at annual reviews and at our one-on-ones, we're not talking about, the number of lines of codes they've delivered or the number of JIRA stories they've closed. But it's really about, are they building those skills? Are they enhancing those skills? Are they mentoring people? Are they adding value to the organization in other ways? Are they growing as an engineer, etc.? And to me, and this is probably hopefully an outdated statement too for you, but we have to stop calling people resources and stop moving them around like they are. We know that they have so many jobs open, they can go anywhere. And so let's not treat people like they are resources. All right, so along the lines of being authentic, this is actually my dad's LinkedIn profile picture. And I was shocked to learn that this was his photo when I first discovered it, because he's a software developer, he's a consultant, so he's sometimes frequently working with recruiters and getting new gigs, right? And I was like, man, how do people take you seriously as you're interviewing for jobs if they see this as your LinkedIn profile picture? And what he said to me was that I don't want to work anywhere that can't respect and understand and embrace my sense of humor and my weirdness. And that has really stuck with me, because he is one of those statistics of retention that I need to keep happy in my organization, right? He has 30 plus years of experience in software development. So I want to keep those people happy and not, force them to leave for another organization who is going to understand and embrace, his personality. And so in addition to, software developers, this has also changed the way I lead. And I feel like I am able to be my authentic self. And I want to be my authentic self because of, the authority that I have with the team to show them that it is okay to do that too. So I did this activity when a couple of new people joined my team, and it's a kind of fun one. So I want you to practice with your partner, just showing, how different questions can get to different information about people. So I first want you just to ask your partner, where are you from? And this should be very quick, so just go. If I already know. Okay, it should be very fast. All right, now ask, what is your favorite part about where you're from? All right, so do you feel like you actually got to know that person better when you asked them a more open-ended question versus just a, simple response, where are you from? Hopefully, yes. Do you feel like you got to know that person better by asking them what they like about where they're from? Yeah? Okay. All right, so this is just something to remember as a leader. Think about the questions that you're asking people. Let them elaborate on what makes them them and what they enjoy about themselves, etc. All right, diversity and inclusion. There are so many studies about diversity and inclusion and how impactful and beneficial it is to organizations, because there's so many different unique ways that employees think and learn and relate to others and approach their work and honestly just see the world. And so as leaders, we do have to ensure that everybody on the team is able to be their authentic selves every day without question. That's our job as a leader. And so instead of finding ways to fit in, we have to make sure people are able to be their authentic selves every day at work without question. I've found that people are going to bring their whole human self to work every day. And instead of spending energy trying to fit in, I want them to spend energy on building awesome technology, right? Okay, so I've also had some people come to me with situations that don't really speak to a very inclusive environment. And so as a leader, I have to take personal responsibility and accountability for those interactions, even if I wasn't physically present. Because culture on a team is made up of every single moment that person experiences throughout their job, right? And as a leader, you have to be the one to feel and truly be accountable for the inclusivity on your teams. And so I said, in that particular situation, I wasn't there, but I will, take what you said and I will address that person and make sure that this never happens again to you or to anybody else. So as leaders, we do have to be accountable for people feeling included and that they can be their authentic selves on your team. Because that's what leaders do. They create inclusive cultures. They ask questions, they listen, they're accountable for psychological safety. They're comfortable with the uncomfortable when they do have to bring up these situations. They always assume positive intent, and they can agree to disagree sometimes. Another tip tied to this theme is to find out what religious or cultural days or holidays are significant to team members, and make sure that you're offering them time off or just ways to accommodate this. Now, I do think there's some attributes where diversity doesn't make sense. And in fact, when I'm interviewing and when I'm hiring, I try to avoid diversity. Number one is values. So if your values don't align to the organization that you're working at or that you're working for, I've found that you spend a lot of energy trying to determine, like, why am I here? Do I feel good about being here? The second one is work ethic. So I only hire really, really motivated and driven and curious people. Obviously, you have your days off, but I need these to be your on days. Attitude, I don't hire people with bad attitudes that are going to bring the rest of the team down. And then past failures. One of my interview questions is always, tell me about a time you failed and what did you learn from it? I need you to have an example of this because everyone has made a mistake. Everyone has failed sometime, especially at work. And I need you to be able to bring those failures and those learnings to my team so that you can help us avoid those situations and save a lot of time and money. All right, and so that brings us to recruiting and interviewing for what I think are, the right things. Okay, so first, obviously, technical skills, but that also includes what are they interested and passionate about? Do they have side projects that they can speak to? Like, where do I really see them get energized when we're interviewing and talking about these different technologies? And also making sure that they have the right skill set for your team. I found that I've hired actually a lot of boot campers recently where they had a really, really high potential, but just didn't have those skills yet. But they were able to make up for it and really come up to those other associate engineers by just having that really strong drive and potential. So don't let technical skills always be a blocker as you're interviewing people. Again, culture fit. So what I like to do is have existing team members interview all of the candidates. So make sure that they're getting to know, who their mentors will be on the team, who will they maybe mentor on the team, so who will be their mentees, who will they be sitting alongside every day. Make sure that that makes sense, that they're comfortable with those people, and that they can look up to those people. And then the next thing is a strategic vision. So, will they help keep the organization moving forward and modern? Are they excited about this vision? Are they bought into the vision? Are their values aligning with what we're doing as an organization? Does anyone else have anything else that they interview for? Like that there's one question that you always ask as an engineering manager, as a senior engineer? Yes.
How do you like to learn?
How do you like to learn? Yes. That's a great one. I love that.
Explain dependency injection without using the word spring.
That's amazing. Oh, so you can see how frustrated they get. That's great. Anyone else?
Favorite Marvel superhero?
Favorite Marvel superhero? That's a fun one. I like to ask, tell me about something that's not on your resume that you're proud of. Because they have to think on their feet and they have to think of something that, usually has to do with their personal life. I'm really proud of this, or like I have this relationship with my sibling and I mentored them, and et cetera. So I think that's a really fun one to really get at, who are you as a person and what drives you maybe outside of work. Anything else? What's the last technical article that you read? Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. What would you do if you win the lottery? Yes. Yeah. That's great. Can learn a lot about someone. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so onboarding is so vital. Hopefully you have an onboarding process on your team. If you don't, I have some tips here. It is so expensive to onboard people with time and money and time of the whole team. So to make it really as efficient as possible is really going to save your team a lot of time, headache, and enable that person also to just have a great experience, right? Okay, so onboarding tips. The first thing I like to do is discuss roles and responsibility of that person and your engineer. Or that person and the manager. So I like to review, here's the job description of, what you accepted. Here's what it would take to get that next level. Let's talk about specific responsibilities of that next level, what it would look like to get promoted, like what should you be working towards on a day-to-day basis. And then we like to discuss, team ways of working. So do people work from home on Fridays? Are we a remote team? Are we not late to stand-ups? Is that really important to us? What are our core hours? Like what times must you be online? Make sure you're providing an overview of the team or project and where it sits in the organization so that they have that context of the bigger picture. So, I like to whiteboard, here are our partner teams, here's who you might be interacting with, the back-end teams that we support or that we consume APIs from. Here are the customers who use our application. Here are the stakeholders that care about our application and want to propel it to move forward. And then here's the leadership that might be making decisions that impact our roles. Also, make sure you're matching the new hire to a peer buddy and a mentor. So the peer buddy might not be someone more senior, but just someone to bounce ideas off and ask questions that they might not be comfortable to ask in front of everybody. And then also that mentor to be the one who is, formally assigned to them, who is more senior to really help them continue growing. Also help them to build a social network. So I like to provide a list of get to know yous. So here's who you should meet with in your first week just to get to know the team, get to know, again, the other developers that you might be interacting with on other teams, the other leaders, etc. And then I like to now, I used to just set up happy hours, but I realized that we cannot assume that everyone wants a happy hour. So I say, what do you want for your welcome celebration? Is it donuts? Is it, a lunch? Is it a happy hour? What does that look like for you? And what would you be most comfortable with? All right, now obviously, as tech organizations, comprehensive tech onboarding is a must. Again, like I said, onboarding is expensive. Let's try to automate as much as possible and really have it in clear and concise documents for how to get people up and running locally as soon as possible. So for me, that means submitting all of the access requests, before that person arrives. It is so frustrating, I know, to join a team and not have a laptop or not have something to do right away and just sit there. So try to submit as much as you can before the person arrives. Again, have step-by-step instructions for how to set up their development environment, hopefully with screenshots and links. Hopefully you have a diagram of your application, network architecture, definitely the tech stack that they'll be interacting with, what they'll need to start learning about and becoming more comfortable with. Hopefully you have documentation already about your release process. What do you have to do to release to prod? What does that look like? Are there change requests? Who should I communicate to, etc.? And then obviously just miscellaneous developer tools, like where do I find this? Where do I find this? What do we do in this situation, etc. So I also like to tell every new hire, if you see something in this process that's broken, just create a PR and fix it. Introduce something that you did at a different company that makes this a more enjoyable experience. Or if something really didn't make sense to you, then make a PR to fix it. Anyone else have anything that they always do to make it an excellent onboarding experience? And then you're like, bye. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So reserve your time. I block my morning. I'll be like, okay, I'm going to sit right here. If you need me, I'm right here. Or this is your mentor and he or she is right there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Quick wins. I love that. Yeah, that's great. So you said, think of, a couple quick wins, so tasks that the person should be able to accomplish pretty easily to really build that confidence and say oh, I'm a contributing member of this team, really quickly. I love that. That's great. Yeah.
We have, when you join our company, you get introduced into the Slack channel and everybody in the Slack channel says, hi!
Party parrot, yeah!
Hey!
Yes. Oh, I love it. So it's a company-wide, oh, that's so cool. Wow. I love that.
In one of the companies, we had a 2-week epic where you would take your homework task and you would adapt to company conventions, deploy on company cloud.
Yeah.
So it gets 10 or 12 tickets where you adapt to how the company works. So you get to know frameworks, etc. and so on.
That's great. So it's kind of like a it's like a template application that you work and deploy through all the pipelines, et cetera?
Yeah.
Great.
Basically, you have a homework task when you're being hired.
Yeah.
And then you adapt to that task according to company conventions, etc.
Oh, yeah.
And so on.
And that's nice because it's repeatable, so you can do it, for each new hire.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Yeah, because navigating just like the company's deployment patterns and customs and different technologies used, cloud service providers, like that is a lot to learn right away. So, yeah. Anything else? Cool. All right. We're going to wrap up a little early here, but my send-off message is that as leaders, we have to be tenaciously committed to the growth of each individual on our team. We want to be those people that people describe as great bosses, leaders, and who people will want to work for, right? And the organizations that people want to work for. So, last interaction with your partner, and by the way, I just also want you to make sure that you're exchanging contact information with your partner if you haven't already or if you already don't know them. These conferences are about getting to know each other and making connections on things that we share in common, right? So make sure you keep this connection with this person that you've been chatting with all afternoon. And here's your last topic, but I will wrap up with a couple other notes. So I'll give you 2 minutes to talk about what really challenged you in this session, and then what is one change that you're going to make starting tomorrow. With each other. Everyone's looking at me. All right, and this one, you don't have to share verbally, but I do want you to reflect on this. And even if you're not in a formal, official leadership role, you are still a leader. So how do you want your team to describe you as a leader? And that is your commitment when you're leaving today, okay? Try to do everything you can to become that person that you want your team to describe you as a leader. Thank you so much, everybody. Here's the website. We have a QR code there if you want to submit feedback for how this went, what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy. I love doing these interactive workshops. This is definitely the biggest crowd for the interactive workshops, so thanks for your patience. Hopefully the partner interacting worked out well. But yeah, otherwise, thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Thank you.